with a lot of nagging kind of injuries in college. And going back to the dedication question, quick, before last season, I don't know how much you guys followed this situation at all, but he left the team, left LSU after last season for a while, which goes back to the sort of on-field type dedication issues. But I'm with you, man. If everything goes right, he could end up being one of the top 15, maybe even one of the top 10 players from this class. If everything goes wrong, he's Randy Gregory, and you guys just torched a third-round pick. And I think it's one or the other.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think he's as bad as Randy Gregory, because Randy Gregory had some drug problems, I think, which is hard to fix than someone who's just, I don't know, not his head's not in it. Hopefully the scenery does him, change of scenery does him some well, but...
Yeah, I think if we get him in there with, the fitness, the fitness guys and with the dietitians and he can bulk up a little bit and hit the gym with Khalil Mack and stuff, and add that extra weight, but, that muscle, and that core strength, I think he would, I think he'd thrive off of a similar role, as I said about PJ Hall. Just using him on obvious passing downs, trying to get the most production out of him that way, because that he's going to be disciplined in that respect, because it's simplified for him. All you're asking him to do is rush the quarterback, try and help out the other guys along the line, and I think that would work in his favour a lot more than trying to do too much with him in his first year. I think try and ease him into the situation that he's in.
Yeah, agreed. And I just want to, there's one point I just wanted to circle back on quick about the Randy Gregory comps. Arden Key's off-field issues are compared to Randy Gregory's. So I would be remiss if I let that point go, because I think they are in a similar vein. And I don't want to speak too much about that, because I'm not sure how much of this is public information, but his off-field concerns, they're very real, as are the on-field concerns, as are the durability concerns. All that said, though, I do agree that he could become a stud, but I see this as a complete coin flip.
Yeah, I mean, there is a reason he fell to the third round. He wouldn't have if everything was okay. So that's another guy. Everything works out. It really is a boomer's bust draft. And I think the safest guy could probably be the fourth round pick, the cornerback,
Nick Nelson.
Nelson, who has an injury, but I haven't heard of any off-field issues. What does this film tell you?
Nick Nelson, he's an interesting player, and this pick was, it's kind of like in Sesame Street, which one of these things is not like the others. Nick Nelson was the pick in this class that wasn't like the others, because I see Nick Nelson as maybe a lower ceiling guy, but a higher floor than these other guys. I know that Nick Nelson's going to make it. He's got a game that is going to make it. I don't see a star there, but I could see a starter for sure. And I definitely see a guy who, at the very worst, is going to be a solid depth guy. But, you're talking about a guy who had near a 70% composite score, his athletic score. He was, I think I had him down as 68.6. He's a smaller cornerback, but he has very good ball skills. His passes defensed stats when he was both at Hawaii and Wisconsin were very high per game. When you're looking at it from like sort of a ratio standpoint, he's a very smart cornerback, in addition to being fairly athletic. The knocks on him, it's a lack of elite speed, or maybe, elite athleticism, even though it's good athleticism, but maybe not sort of elite. And then, the other strange thing about Nick Nelson, and I really couldn't get my head wrapped around this thing, he's got very good ball skills, in terms of knocking the ball away and defending the passes. He never had a college interception, though, even though his hands were consistently on the ball. And it's a tad troubling, because you do want your cornerback to be able to flip the field for you, especially a cornerback who's as adept at getting his hands on the ball as Nelson. Hopefully that's something they can work on. If he was able to convert some of those passive defense into interceptions, I think that's when you're going to start to say, oh man, like he went below where he should have gone. Because now you're talking about a guy who could be an NFL starter. But as far as a guy who went 110th overall, I just thought that was a very solid pick.
Do you see him in the slot in the next level, just because of he didn't have the greatest 40-time or 10-yard split, but he did have a really good 3-cone and a 20-yard shuttle. So what do you think of where he fits in the NFL?
I think he could end up there. In terms of with his measurables and his passes defensed numbers, he reminds me more of, say, MJ Stewart or Duke Dawson, a couple other slots from this class, than he does some of your more prototypical outside guys, like Josh Jackson or whatever. We'll see, but yeah, I definitely think, especially initially, I think I might try to work him in there just to see him get on the field, and we'll see where it goes long term. But yeah, I wouldn't be averse to trying him there. I wouldn't be averse to that idea.
Awesome.
No.
I guess the next guy is your guy, Mo Hurst. Now, maybe if Mo Hurst went round 1 and Colton Miller went round 2, maybe that would have been so bad, huh? First couple of days.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during the draft, I kept tweeting out best available, at any given point. These are the top 10 best available. And for the longest time, Mo Hurst was just sort of sitting above that list by himself. It was shocking to see him fall that far. We knew at the combine that they had flagged him for a heart condition. So we knew that, and we knew he'd been sent home. So that was troubling. We didn't get a lot of other information outside of, there was that report that he'd been cleared by a Harvard doctor. And of course, just by implication, the fact that he played at Michigan all those years, he had to have been cleared by the Michigan doctors. So, I know Raiders fans, the argument that Raiders fans make about this is, he didn't miss time in college, and he was obviously cleared by the Michigan doctors. He's cleared by the Harvard guys. And now there's this idea that, it would be dangerous for him to play, which is BS, because we've seen him play. We've seen him play at a high level. And then on the other hand, there is this idea that the NFL has access to way, way, way more information than I do. It's not even close. They have access to everything. I only have access to a very small amount of information and what I hear. So the fact that, I had him as a late first round guy, the fact that he fell to the 5th round, it leads me to believe, well, the NFL knows something that I don't. And Matt Miller of Bleacher Report put out right after the draft, he said 10 scouts, maybe he had more than 10 scouts and executives. And he had some very troubling quotes that you gentlemen may have seen where. Yeah,
we've heard about that. I'm sure the Raiders, like you said, have very much more information than they do. So I don't know how he can come out and say stuff like that, when the Raiders have done the due diligence, and I don't know what to think of it really. What are your thoughts?
Well, here's what I'd say. The Raiders took him in the 5th round, right? They didn't take him in the 1st, so they had reservations themselves. They took 5 other players before they took Mo Hurst. So yeah, on their board too, they had to knock him way down for only medical reasons. This has nothing to do with who Mo Hurst is as a player, because Mo Hurst as a player, everything that we said about Hall before when we were talking about PJ Hall, Mo Hurst is that without the question marks, right? He's a guy who dominated in the Big Ten over multiple years. You're talking about a guy who can get you interior disruption. Mo Hurst is the guy that we wanted in this class, unless you're talking about like a Taven Bryan is very good at that too. But for what Mo Hurst is, he was the best player in the class at that one specific thing, attacking the one gap. And, the fact that he fell, it is a data point that is a tad troubling. It's hard for me to speak to this because I don't know what's true. I don't know if the rest of the NFL got gun shy because he had bad medical reports, and then a bunch of teams just started yanking him off the board. So all of a sudden he started free falling, and maybe the Raiders were the one smart team that said, you know what, let's just give this a shot. Or I don't know if it's the other way and they just threw away a 5th round pick. I will say, once you get into late day 3, I was talking with Gavin about this, just start rolling the dice, and if you have a doctor that says, well, no, I see it a little bit more positively than the NFL does with Hurst, give it a shot. Why not give it a shot? Take it. I was talking with Gavin about this. Take this year to year, right? If you bring Mo Hurst off the bench, let's cut his snaps way down in year 1. This is assuming he can play. Now, again, I don't have access to his medical reports, but assuming that he is cleared by the team doctors to play, I would try to limit Mo Hurst snaps in the same way that the Philadelphia 76ers have limited Joel Embiid's court time over the past several years. I would just have Hurst come in on obvious passing downs. You can artificially cut his snaps way down if you do that, which presumably should make it less of a risk. But again, I don't even know what the risk is. So again, it's hard for me to state. But we know he's going to be very good in that role from day one because we've seen him produce against some very, very good NFL linemen in the Big Ten. So I love that pick. Again, I don't know if it's a wasted pick or not, but why not roll the dice? It's the fifth round.
I think
right?
it's a great place to roll the dice on a player like, probably the best interior pass rusher in the draft class. So it's definitely a worth gamble, worth taking.
Yeah, I would say he's probably the best defensive lineman in the class as well, by a clear distance, in my opinion. And I think that with the whole heart condition situation, I mean, the Raiders have come out and said that he's cleared to play, and they don't want to talk about it no more. That just tells me that they're comfortable with the situation. They'll address it accordingly year to year. They'll monitor it. They'll monitor him anyway because, every major sports team does their due diligence and they do look after their players anyway. So it will be good to see Maurice Hurst this season, and I'm just hoping and praying that whatever is, has gone on, he's absolutely fine to play and he has a stellar career, because I think that after all the doom and gloom surrounding him and the draft, I mean, he must have been absolutely gutted, and it would just be nice to see him, have a really good career and then look back at it and say, look, I have my doubters, but I've played football, what I love to do. I've got paid for it, and I've been successful.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if everything works out and he's cleared and he can just go about playing at 100% health, he's Grady Jarrett. So you guys just got Grady Jarrett in the fifth round if all else is a go. But yeah, it's just really hard. We'll have to continue monitoring the reports. I'm fascinated to see the way his career plays out for sure.
Yeah, because we spoke about this, didn't we? We said about, on our telephone call, we said about, it's just going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But we was just hoping that, it is nothing and it is just one of those regular situations where, people do have some sort of, problem, but it can be maintained, it can be looked after. And then hopefully he just, he can play this year and of good production. This is another thing we said, even if we just get one good year of production out of him and they say, look, that's it, at least you've got some sort of value from that pick. You've still got value from a fifth round pick because it is a later round pick. So it's not like you're risking a first rounder on him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in the sixth round, we took a linebacker, a Victor Azim, and an undrafted free agent, and Jason Kabinda. Who do you think has the best shot at making the roster? And just break down those two guys for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting question. Honestly, I think I would say Kabinda. I hadn't thought about that before, but if you were to say only one of those two guys is going to make the roster, which will it be? Right. I think I would take Kabinda. Victor is a very interesting case. Going back to what I was saying about Arden Key, Azim Victor is a guy that if you had asked me a year ago, where is Azim Victor going to go in the draft, I would have told you he's probably going to go day 2. And I wouldn't necessarily have been stunned if someone had said, well, he's going to be a late first round pick. But last year was an unmitigated disaster. I've been doing this job for 5 years now. There's been very few seasons that have been as disastrous for a player as last year was for Victor. I was actually real surprised that Victor got drafted. And he had a lot of issues last year. Suspensions, off the field issues. He had injuries. And then he had, going back to the on-field desire aspect of the evaluation, he had that too. Like he came back last year after missing a bunch of time and his starting spot had been taken. And so then Washington tried to use him as like an edge rusher for a little bit, and he basically just couldn't crack the roster. You know, like he sort of came back to